Story number 1. The Guests Who Never Left. The Stanley Hotel, Estes Park, Colorado. I've always been drawn to the stories that linger in the shadows of old buildings, tales whispered through cracked walls and echoed in empty halls. When my family decided to spend our winter break at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, I saw it as the perfect opportunity to immerse ourselves in its storied past. Little did I know, the hotel's history would soon intertwine with our own in ways we could never have imagined. The Stanley Hotel stood majestically against the backdrop of the Rocky Mountains, its grand facade illuminated by the soft glow of winter lights. We arrived on a crisp December evening, the snow crunching under our tires as we navigated the winding roads leading to the hotel. The lobby was warm and inviting, adorned with antique furnishings and the lingering scent of pine and firewood. We were greeted by a friendly receptionist who handed us the keys to our suite on the third floor. Our room was spacious, with large windows offering a panoramic view of the snow-covered landscape. The fireplace crackled softly, adding to the cozy ambience. My parents, Sarah and David, were eager to explore the hotel's amenities, while my younger brother, Ben, and I settled in, excited for the adventures that awaited us. That first night, after a hearty dinner in the elegant dining room, we retired to our room. The soft hum of conversations from other guests filtered through the walls, blending with the occasional creak of the old building. As I lay in bed, flipping through channels, I glanced over at Ben, who was already fast asleep, his face peaceful and content. Around midnight, a faint noise stirred me from my thoughts, a soft tapping, like gentle footsteps, coming from the hallway outside our door. I sat up, listening intently. The sound was subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniably there. Probably just someone looking for their room, I whispered to myself, trying to dismiss the unease creeping up my spine. But the tapping continued, growing slightly louder and more insistent. I nudged Ben awake, hoping it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. "Ben, wake up. Do you hear that?" He stirred, blinking sleepily. "Hear what?" "The tapping outside our door. It sounds like footsteps." Ben sat up, eyes wide with curiosity. "Maybe it's someone checking in or out." Before I could respond, the door handle began to turn slowly. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached the door cautiously. Peeking through the peephole, I saw a man standing in the dimly lit hallway. He was dressed in what appeared to be ceremonial garb, an ornate suit with intricate patterns and a tall hat that cast a shadow over his face. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice wavering slightly. The man smiled warmly, revealing a row of perfectly white teeth. "Good evening. I'm here to escort Ben to the party on the third floor." I frowned, confused. "What party?" "The Grand Winter Gala. It's time for the festivities to begin." Ben sat up, rubbing his eyes. "A party? But it's midnight." The man's smile didn't waver. "The party never truly ends here. Follow me, little friend." Before I could protest, Ben was already pulling on his shoes, his excitement palpable. "Come on, Ben. Let's go." Panic surged through me. "Ben, wait. There's no party on the third floor. We're staying here." The man's expression softened, but his eyes held an unsettling depth. "The party is in full swing. Don't miss out on the fun." Desperate, I reached for the door handle again, trying to shut him out. But the door wouldn't budge. The man took a step forward, his presence both comforting and eerie. "Please, Ben. It's time." Ben hesitated for a moment, then turned to me with a pleading look. "Can we? It sounds like so much fun." I grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "No, Ben. There's nothing here. Let's go back to bed." But Ben was already pulling away, heading toward the door despite my attempts to restrain him. In a split second, the man vanished, leaving behind an oppressive silence. I quickly ushered Ben back to bed, his breaths coming in quick, shallow gasps. The rest of the night was restless. Ben refused to sleep, repeatedly asking about the party and the man in the hallway. I tried to reassure him, but the fear lingered, hanging heavy in the room. The next morning, the sun shone brightly through the windows, dispelling the remnants of the previous night's unease. We enjoyed a hearty breakfast, the warmth of the dining room a stark contrast to the cold, unsettling memories of midnight. Later that day, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to explore the hotel's third floor, hoping to uncover any clue about the mysterious party Ben had mentioned. The third floor was grander than the rest, with ornate decorations and vintage furnishings that spoke of a bygone era. As I wandered the halls, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I reached the end of the corridor and found a large ballroom, its doors wide open to reveal an empty, beautifully decorated room. There was no sign of any party, no guests in sight. Confused, I called out softly, "Is anyone here?" No response. The room was eerily silent, the only sound the distant ticking of a grand clock hanging from the ceiling. I turned to leave, but that's when I noticed something on the floor, a small, handwritten ticket lying near the center of the room. It was simple, with elegant script that read, "See you again, little friend." My heart skipped a beat as I picked it up, recognizing the handwriting from Ben's description. I rushed back to our room, the ticket clutched tightly in my hand. That evening, as we prepared to leave, I confronted my parents about the strange events. Sarah and David exchanged worried glances, their concern mirroring my own. "We need to talk to the manager," David said firmly. "There's something going on here." The manager, a stern woman named Ms. Reynolds, listened intently as I recounted the night's events. She nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "I'm sorry you had to experience that," she said. "The Stanley has a long history, and sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. We've had reports of unusual activity before, but nothing concrete. Is there a reason why Ben would be targeted?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with fear. Ms. Reynolds hesitated before responding. "There are rumors of a child who used to stay here decades ago. He was very fond of the winter gala, and some say his spirit still roams the halls, searching for the festivities he loved so much." I felt a chill run down my spine. Could this restless spirit be the man Ben saw? The one who invited him to a non-existent party? Determined to find answers, I decided to stay an extra day, hoping to uncover more about the hotel's haunted history. That night, as we settled into our room once again, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Around midnight, the tapping returned, softer this time, more distant. I tried to ignore it, focusing on getting some sleep, but the sound was persistent. Ben was already awake, his eyes wide and anxious. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I nodded, my heart racing. "Yeah, it's probably nothing. Just try to relax." But then, the door handle began to turn again. This time, I felt a surge of courage. I approached the door, determined to confront whatever was haunting us. Peering through the peephole, I saw the same man in ceremonial garb, but this time, he wasn't alone. A group of children stood behind him, their faces pale and eyes hollow. "Ben, come join us," the man called out, his voice echoing through the hallway. I stepped back, shaking my head. "Ben, no. Don't go with them." But Ben was already reaching for his shoes, mirroring the actions of the spirit. Panic surged through me as I realized the danger we were in. The door began to open, and I could see the children's ghostly forms moving toward us, their movements synchronized and unnerving. Desperate, I grabbed Ben's hand, pulling him away from the door. "We're not going anywhere with you. Please, leave us alone." The children halted, their expressions unchanged, their eyes fixed on us with an eerie longing. The man stepped forward, his smile now tinged with sadness. "They just want to dance, to celebrate the gala. Don't keep them waiting." I backed away, my mind racing for a solution. "Ben, come back. It's not safe." But Ben was being pulled towards the door, his resistance weakening. In a last-ditch effort, I lunged forward, grabbing his arm firmly. "No, Ben. Stay with us." For a moment, everything seemed to hang in the balance, the push and pull between the living and the dead. Then, with a collective sigh, the children faded, their presence dissipating like mist in the morning sun. The door swung shut, and the room returned to its usual stillness. Ben collapsed into my arms, breathing heavily. "I'm sorry, I couldn't help it." Tears welled up in my eyes as I held him close. "It's okay. We're safe now." The following day, we decided to leave the Stanley Hotel, our brief stay now marked by experiences we could hardly comprehend. As we packed our belongings, I noticed the handwritten ticket still lying on the desk. Carefully, I placed it in my pocket, a reminder of the night's harrowing events. Back home, life gradually returned to normal. Yet, the memories of the Stanley lingered, haunting me in ways I couldn't explain. I often found myself gazing at the ticket, pondering the fate of the restless spirits that still roamed the halls of the Stanley. Months later, driven by a mix of fear and fascination, I returned to Estes Park, determined to uncover the full story behind the Winter Gala and the child's lingering presence. I met with Ms. Reynolds, who shared old photographs and newspaper clippings detailing the hotel's history. One particular article caught my attention, a story from the 1920s about a young boy named Tommy Turner, the son of the hotel's manager. Tommy was known for his love of the Winter Gala, always eager to participate in the festivities. Tragically, during one particularly harsh winter, Tommy went missing, never to be found. The hotel closed temporarily as a search was conducted, but no trace of him was ever discovered. Realizing the connection, I understood that the spirit haunting us was Tommy Turner, forever yearning to relive the nights he cherished so much. The thought weighed heavily on me, a reminder of the thin veil between the past and the present, and the enduring echoes of lost souls seeking closure. Determined to bring peace to Tommy and the other restless spirits, I collaborated with local historians and paranormal investigators. Together, we organized a memorial gala, honoring the memories of those who had once walked the halls of the Stanley. On the night of the event, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. We gathered in the ballroom, the same room where I had found the ticket, now adorned with candles and photographs of past guests. As the clock struck midnight, the air grew still, and the familiar tapping echoed through the room. I took a deep breath, addressing the assembled guests and the unseen spirits. "We honor your memories tonight. May you find the peace you've been seeking?" As if in response, the temperature warmed, and a gentle light filled the room. The figures of children appeared, their faces serene and joyful, joining us in the celebration. Tommy stood at the center, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice carrying the weight of years gone by. "We're finally at peace." The room shimmered with a soft glow as the spirits began to fade, their presence no longer a haunting but a celebration of lives once lived. I felt a profound sense of relief, knowing that our efforts had bridged the gap between the living and the dead, offering closure to those who had lingered for far too long. As we left the Stanley Hotel that night, the snow continued to fall gently, blanketing the world in a peaceful silence. The hotel, once a place of lingering sorrow, now stood as a beacon of remembrance and reconciliation. The guests who never left had finally found their way, and with them went the lingering shadows of the past, leaving behind only the echoes of laughter and the promise of peace. Story number 2. Shadows on the Ice. Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming. Winter in Yellowstone is a study in contrasts. The park transforms into a frozen wonderland, where pristine snow blankets the landscape and icy winds whisper through the pines. It was during one such winter that my friends and I decided to embark on a camping trip near one of Yellowstone's most serene frozen lakes. Little did we know, the stillness of the ice would soon become the backdrop for a nightmarish encounter that would haunt us forever. I've always been the adventurous type, drawn to the untamed beauty of nature. When Ryan suggested we spend a weekend camping by Lake Serenity, a remote spot known for its clear, glass-like ice, I was immediately on board. Our group consisted of 5 friends: Ryan, the planner; Mia, the skeptic; Jake, the jokester; Sarah, the sensitive one; and me, Tom, the storyteller. We packed our gear, fueled by excitement and the promise of unforgettable memories. The drive to Yellowstone was long but scenic. As we approached Lake Serenity, the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the frozen expanse. The lake was surrounded by towering evergreens, their branches heavy with snow. We set up camp near the shore, the ice stretching out before us like a vast, silent ocean. That first night, the temperature plummeted, and a biting wind swept across the lake. We huddled around the campfire, sharing ghost stories to pass the time. The flames flickered, casting eerie shadows on our faces as we took turns recounting tales of haunted places and restless spirits. Ryan went first, telling us about the legend of the Ice Walker, a spectral figure said to roam Yellowstone's frozen lakes, searching for lost souls to claim. Mia rolled her eyes, dismissing it as mere folklore, while Jake added humorous embellishments to lighten the mood. Sarah listened intently, her eyes reflecting the firelight, while I felt a chill run down my spine, despite the warmth of the flames. As the night deepened, the wind grew stronger, howling through the trees like the lament of 1,000 ghosts. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks dancing into the cold night air. We laughed and joked, trying to shake off the creeping unease that the stories had planted in our minds. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed across the lake, silencing our laughter. We froze, listening intently. Another crack followed, louder this time, as if something massive was shifting beneath the ice. My heart pounded as I glanced around, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. "Probably just ice settling," Ryan said, attempting to reassure us, though his voice wavered slightly. But the cracks continued, irregular and menacing, growing closer to our campsite. The ice beneath our feet groaned ominously, sending vibrations through the ground. I could see our breaths forming visible clouds in the frigid air, mingling with the steam rising from the fire. "We should move," Mia suggested, her earlier skepticism replaced by genuine fear. Before anyone could respond, the ice near the far end of the lake gave way with a resounding crack. A section of the frozen surface splintered, sending a cascade of ice shards into the water below. We watched in horror as a dark shadow emerged from the depths, standing upright on the remaining ice. It was a man, his form barely discernible in the dim light, clad in what appeared to be a tattered, old-fashioned suit. His presence was unnerving, a stark contrast to the serene beauty of the lake. He stood motionless for a moment, then began to move towards us, each step deliberate and slow. "Did you see that?" Jake whispered, his usual bravado gone. Ryan nodded, gripping his flashlight tightly. "Stay calm. Let's not panic." The figure continued his approach, and as he drew nearer, the details became clearer. His face was pale and gaunt, eyes hollow and devoid of warmth. His mouth curled into a sinister smile that sent shivers down my spine. "Who are you?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. The man stopped a few feet away, his eyes locking onto mine. "I've been waiting," he intoned, his voice echoing unnaturally across the frozen expanse. Sarah clutched her blanket, her knuckles white. "What do you want?" He extended a hand, pointing towards the center of the lake. "Come join us. Don't be afraid." Before anyone could react, the ice beneath him began to ripple and sink. The man's form wavered, distorting as if struggling to maintain his shape. He laughed, a hollow, haunting sound that seemed to come from the depths of the earth itself. Without warning, he plunged into the ice, pulling a long, jagged crack that snaked towards our campsite. The ground trembled beneath us, and a wave of icy water surged toward our feet, freezing instantly upon contact. We stood rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear and disbelief. "Run!" Ryan shouted, breaking the spell. We scrambled to our feet, hearts racing, as the ice groaned and threatened to give way beneath us. The shadowy figure reemerged, now standing inches from us, his eyes boring into ours with an intensity that felt almost physical. "Don't let him take you," Mia cried, tears streaming down her face. Jake grabbed my arm, pulling me towards the safety of our campfire. "We need to get out of here, now." We ran, adrenaline fueling our every step, as the ice continued to creak and crack behind us. The shadow followed, his presence a constant reminder of the nightmare unfolding. The wind whipped around us, making it difficult to see, but we pushed forward, desperate to reach the warmth and safety of our camp. Behind us, the ice gave way entirely, sending a plume of frothy water into the air. The shadow seemed to dissipate into the storm, his laugh lingering in the cold night air. We reached the campfire, collapsing onto the ground, breathless and trembling. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the howling wind. We stared at each other, eyes wide with terror, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. "We need to leave," Ryan said, his voice shaky but determined. "Now." We packed up our gear in a frantic rush, the memory of the shadow still fresh in our minds. The drive back to civilization was tense and silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts, replaying the night's events over and over. Days passed, but the experience at Lake Serenity refused to leave my mind. Ryan suggested we document what happened, sharing our story with others who might have encountered similar phenomena. Skeptical but intrigued, we decided to delve deeper into the legend of the Ice Walker. Through research, we discovered that Lake Serenity had a dark history. Decades ago, a group of travelers had perished on the ice, their bodies never recovered. Locals spoke of a restless spirit that haunted the frozen lake, a man consumed by grief and anger, seeking others to share his eternal torment. The more we learned, the more it seemed our encounter was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger pattern. The Ice Walker was a manifestation of the lake's tragic past, a warning to those who dared to disturb its icy depths. Determined to put the restless spirit to peace, we enlisted the help of a local historian and a medium. Together, we organized a memorial service by the lake, honoring the lives lost and seeking closure for the tormented soul that lingered on the ice. On the night of the ceremony, the atmosphere was heavy with anticipation. We lit candles and placed them around the lake, their flickering flames casting soft reflections on the ice. The medium, an elderly woman named Eleanor, led us in prayers and chants, her voice steady and soothing. As the ceremony progressed, the temperature seemed to drop, and a thick fog rolled in from the lake's surface. We held our breaths, watching as the ice shimmered under the moonlight. Suddenly, a faint figure appeared on the far side of the lake, the Ice Walker. Eleanor stepped forward, her eyes meeting the spirit's gaze. "We honor your memory," she intoned softly. "May you find peace." The figure paused, his hollow eyes meeting ours. For a moment, there was a palpable tension, as if time itself had slowed. Then, slowly, he began to fade, the ice beneath him solidifying once more. A sense of calm washed over the lake, the oppressive energy lifting. We stood in silence, the weight of the night's events settling around us. The shadow was gone, replaced by a serene stillness that felt almost sacred. We knew that while the memory of that night would linger, we had taken a step towards healing the wounds of the past. As we left Yellowstone, the beauty of the frozen lake now held a bittersweet significance. The shadows on the ice had been banished, but their presence would forever be etched in our minds. We had faced the unknown and emerged with a deeper understanding of the delicate balance between the living and the restless spirits that linger in the forgotten corners of the world. Story number 3. The Strange Guide on the Appalachian Trail. Appalachian Trail, Vermont. I've always been drawn to the wilderness, the untamed beauty of nature that offers a respite from the chaos of everyday life. So when the Carter family, my parents, my younger sister Emily, and I decided to spend our winter vacation hiking the Appalachian Trail in Vermont, I couldn't have been more excited. The trail, renowned for its breathtaking vistas and challenging terrain, promised an adventure that we would all remember for years to come. Our journey began in the crisp morning air of late December. The snow had settled thickly over the forest, transforming the landscape into a serene, white wonderland. The towering pines stood majestically, their branches heavy with snow, while the ground beneath our feet was blanketed in a pristine layer of untouched snow. The silence of the forest was both calming and eerie, a stark contrast to the bustling city life we had left behind. We set out early, bundled in layers of clothing to protect against the biting cold. My father, a seasoned hiker, led the way with confidence, his sturdy boots crunching through the snow with each determined step. My mother carried the supplies, her hands deftly managing the backpack that held everything we needed for the trek. Emily and I followed closely, our breaths visible in the frosty air as we chatted about the adventure that awaited us. By midday, the sun was high, casting a golden glow across the snowy expanse. We reached a clearing where the trail split into two paths. My father consulted his map, pointing us toward the narrower path that promised a quicker ascent to our next campsite. As we continued, the forest seemed to grow denser, the trees intertwining overhead to form a natural canopy that filtered the sunlight into a soft, diffused glow. As the afternoon waned, the temperature began to drop, and the wind picked up, carrying with it a chill that seeped into our bones. We decided to set up camp before dusk, finding a sheltered spot near a frozen stream. The process was methodical, pitching tents, arranging sleeping bags, and stoking the fire that would keep us warm through the night. After dinner, we sat around the campfire, the flames dancing and casting flickering shadows on our faces. My father regaled us with stories of his previous hikes, tales of encounters with wildlife and the occasional brush with the elements. Emily and I listened intently, the warmth of the fire providing a comforting contrast to the cold night air. As the night deepened, the sounds of the forest shifted. The crackling of the fire was joined by the soft rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. We grew quiet, each lost in our own thoughts, the serenity of the wilderness enveloping us. Just past midnight, a sharp crack echoed through the forest, startling us all. My father immediately sprang to his feet, eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. Emily clutched her sleeping bag tighter, while I felt a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. Probably just a branch breaking, my father reassured us, though his voice held a hint of uncertainty. Let's get some rest. We settled back into our tents, the flickering light of the campfire casting elongated shadows outside. The wind howled louder, rattling the tents and sending icicles clattering from the trees. I lay awake, listening to the rhythmic breathing of my family, trying to shake off the lingering fear. Around 2 a.m., a faint tapping sound broke the silence, a soft, deliberate knocking that seemed to come from the direction of the trail. My heart raced as I lay still, straining to hear any other noises. The tapping continued, slow and steady, growing louder with each passing minute. I nudged Emily awake. "Do you hear that?" She nodded, eyes wide with fear. "What is it?" Before we could respond, the tapping ceased as abruptly as it had started. The silence that followed was oppressive, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. We lay there, listening to our own heartbeat, unsure of what to do next. Just before dawn, we were awakened by the sound of footsteps crunching through the snow outside our tents. My father quickly unzipped his tent, peering out into the darkness. "Stay calm," he whispered. "I'm going to check it out." He stepped out into the frigid night, the cold air stinging his face as he moved cautiously toward the sound. The footsteps continued, slow and deliberate, echoing through the stillness of the forest. My mother followed, concern etched on her face, while Emily and I stayed behind, huddled together in our tent. After what felt like an eternity, my father returned, his expression tense. "It's nothing," he said, though the uncertainty in his eyes betrayed his words. "Probably just an animal. We should get some more sleep." Reluctantly, we settled back into our tents, the uneasy feeling lingering as we tried to drift off to sleep. Hours passed, and the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, casting a pale glow over the snowy landscape. Breakfast was a subdued affair, the events of the night leaving a lingering sense of unease among us. We packed up our gear, ready to continue our hike, but an unspoken tension hung in the air. As we set off, the trail seemed more desolate than before, the footprints of our camp fading in the fresh snow. The morning sun shone brightly, dispelling the shadows of the night, but the memory of the tapping and the mysterious footsteps lingered in our minds. By midday, we reached a particularly remote section of the trail, where the trees grew thick and the path narrowed. It was here that we encountered the old man, a figure that seemed to materialize out of the very essence of the forest. He stood alone on the trail, an imposing figure clad in a heavy, worn coat. In his hand, he carried a large, gnarled walking stick that looked as though it had seen countless miles. His face was weathered, the lines etched deeply from years of exposure to the elements, yet his eyes held a sharpness that suggested a keen awareness of his surroundings. "Good afternoon," he greeted us, his voice gravelly yet warm. "You look a bit lost." My father stepped forward, sensing the need for caution. "We're just trying to find our way back to the ranger station. It's been a challenging hike, and the weather turned unexpectedly last night." The old man nodded thoughtfully. "The trail can be unforgiving, especially in winter. I've been guiding hikers through these woods for many years. Perhaps I can assist you." Relief washed over us. "That would be greatly appreciated," my father replied. "We're currently at mile marker 45, but we seem to have lost our bearings." The old man studied our map for a moment before handing it back. "I know this area well. Follow me, and I'll lead you back to the station. It's not far from here." Grateful for his offer, we followed him as he led the way through the dense forest. His pace was steady, his walking stick tapping rhythmically against the ground, breaking the silence of the woods. The trail seemed to come alive under his guidance, the trees parting to reveal a clearer path. As we walked, I couldn't help but notice the peculiar stillness that surrounded the old man. He spoke little, his attention focused intently on the path ahead. His presence was both comforting and unsettling, a reminder of the thin line between human and something else, something ancient and enduring within these woods. After a short distance, we reached a small clearing where the ranger station stood, its weathered facade blending seamlessly with the surrounding forest. The station looked like it hadn't been updated in decades, its windows fogged from the cold inside. "Thank you so much," my father said sincerely. "We're truly grateful for your help." The old man smiled, a gesture that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's my pleasure. Always happy to assist travelers in need." Before we could respond, he turned and began to walk away, his figure gradually blending into the forest once more. There was something oddly familiar about him, yet I couldn't quite place it. As we entered the ranger station, the door creaked open, and we were greeted by a young ranger who looked more accustomed to modern amenities than the rustic charm of the station. "Welcome back," he said with a smile. "I'm Ranger Thompson. Did you need any assistance?" We quickly filled him in on our ordeal, mentioning the old man who had guided us. Ranger Thompson listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "That's unusual," he remarked. "We haven't had a guide here in over 20 years. Most people rely on the official trails and our maps." My father exchanged a puzzled glance with me. "We met a man who offered to help us find our way back." Ranger Thompson's eyes narrowed slightly. "There have been reports of a missing guide named Henry Carter, no relation, I assume, who vanished in these woods about 22 years ago. Some say he still wanders the trails, helping lost hikers find their way. It's likely you encountered his spirit." A chill ran down my spine. The resemblance between Henry Carter and the old man we had met was uncanny, same weathered face, same piercing eyes. "Are you saying we met a ghost?" my mother asked, her voice tinged with fear. Ranger Thompson nodded solemnly. "Many believe so. Henry was dedicated to guiding hikers until his untimely disappearance. Some say his spirit remains, forever bound to these trails, ensuring that no one else gets lost as he did." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over us. My father looked back toward the forest, as if hoping to catch a glimpse of the spectral guide. But the forest remained silent, its secrets intact. "We should report this," Ranger Thompson suggested. "It's important to document any sightings of Henry Carter. It might help others who find themselves lost." We agreed, providing him with our accounts of the encounter. As we left the ranger station, the winter sun casting long shadows across the snow-covered ground, I couldn't shake the feeling that Henry Carter was still watching over us, his presence a guardian of the trails he had once so lovingly tended. That evening, as we settled into our cabins, the events of the day replayed in my mind. The kindness of the old man, his eerie familiarity, and the ranger's explanation all converged into a chilling realization. The Appalachian Trail wasn't just a path through the wilderness, it was a corridor between the living and the dead, a place where the echoes of the past still walked alongside the present. Over the next few days, we continued our hike with a newfound awareness. We shared our story with other hikers, some of whom confirmed similar encounters with a mysterious guide. It seemed Henry Carter's spirit still roamed the trails, a benevolent presence ensuring that no one else would suffer the same fate he did. One evening, as we prepared to camp near a frozen waterfall, Emily voiced what we were all thinking. "Do you think he's still searching for a way back? Maybe he can't move on until he finds peace." My father nodded thoughtfully. "It's possible. Maybe our presence here helps him feel less alone, knowing that someone remembers him." As night fell, we sat around the campfire once more, the flames flickering against the encroaching darkness. The forest was alive with sounds, the crackling of ice and the distant calls of nocturnal animals. I glanced up at the star-filled sky, feeling a deep connection to the land and its history. Suddenly, a familiar tapping echoed through the forest, a soft, deliberate knocking that seemed to come from all around us. We froze, the hairs on the back of our necks standing on end. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, and a sense of anticipation filled the air. "Maybe he's here tonight," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. The tapping ceased as abruptly as it had started, leaving us in a profound silence. We sat in stillness, the warmth of the fire a stark contrast to the cold tension that surrounded us. Just before midnight, a figure emerged from the darkness, a man in a heavy coat, carrying a large walking stick. His presence was both comforting and unsettling, his eyes meeting ours with a mix of sorrow and determination. "Good evening," he greeted us, his voice echoing softly in the stillness. "I see you found your way back." My father stepped forward cautiously. "Yes, thanks to you. We were truly lost last night." The old man nodded, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I'm glad I could help. It's important to me that no one else gets lost as I did." Emily looked at him, her curiosity piqued. "Why do you keep helping hikers? Don't you ever find peace?" The man sighed, the weight of his years evident in his posture. "I've been guiding travelers for so long that it's become my purpose. Perhaps one day I will find the peace I seek, but until then, I will continue to ensure that others don't suffer as I did." There was a moment of silence, the forest holding its breath as if acknowledging his plight. Then, without another word, the man turned and began to walk back into the darkness, his figure gradually fading until he was nothing more than a shadow among the trees. We watched in awe, the significance of the encounter settling over us like a heavy blanket. Henry Carter wasn't just a ghost story, he was a guardian of the trails, a testament to dedication and the enduring human spirit. The rest of our hike proceeded smoothly, the memory of Henry's guidance a comforting presence in our minds. When we finally returned to civilization, the experience left an indelible mark on us all. We shared our story widely, connecting with other hikers who had encountered the same mysterious guide. In the years that followed, I often found myself reminiscing about our winter hike on the Appalachian Trail. The beauty of the Vermont wilderness, the camaraderie of my family, and the haunting presence of Henry Carter intertwined into a story that felt both magical and terrifying. One evening, years later, I received a call from Ranger Thompson. "Tom, it's good to hear from you. I wanted to let you know that we've officially recognized Henry Carter as a legendary figure on the Appalachian Trail. Your account, along with others, has helped us understand his role in these woods." I felt a sense of closure, knowing that Henry's story would live on, ensuring that his legacy was honored and remembered. "I'm glad I could help," I replied. "He deserves to be remembered." As I hung up the phone, I looked out the window at the snowy landscape, the memories of that winter hike vivid in my mind. The Appalachian Trail had given me more than just an adventure. It had connected me to a story of dedication, loss, and the enduring bond between the living and the spirits of the past. Sometimes, when the wind whispers through the trees and the snow blankets the ground, I imagine Henry Carter still guiding lost souls through the wilderness, his presence a beacon of hope and a reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the mysteries that lie just beyond the trail's edge. Story number 4. Mystic Glimmers in Yosemite. Yosemite National Park, California. Winter in Yosemite is a time of serene beauty and biting cold. The towering granite cliffs are draped in snow, and the usually bustling trails lie quiet under a blanket of white. It was during one such winter that my wife, Laura, and I decided to escape the chaos of our everyday lives and immerse ourselves in the tranquility of nature. We chose a secluded corner of the park, far from the well-trodden paths, to set up our campsite and experience the raw, untouched wilderness. I've always been captivated by the stories and legends that surround Yosemite. The park is a place where nature reigns supreme, but it also holds secrets that the wind whispers through the trees and the shadows cast by the moonlight. As we drove deeper into the park, the landscape transformed into a winter wonderland. Snow-covered pines stood sentinel around us, and the air was crisp with the promise of adventure. By late afternoon, we arrived at our chosen spot, a small clearing beside a frozen stream. The area was perfect, secluded, with minimal signs of human presence, yet close enough to the heart of the park to explore its hidden wonders. We set up our tent, bundled in layers to protect against the chill, and arranged our gear for the night. The sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange that reflected off the icy surfaces around us. As dusk gave way to night, the temperature plummeted, and the world around us grew silent except for the soft crackling of our campfire. We sat close to the flames, wrapped in blankets, sharing stories and savoring the warmth. Laura, ever the enthusiast, was eager to recount tales of Yosemite's haunted past, stories of lost hikers, mysterious apparitions, and unexplained phenomena that had been passed down through generations. I listened, partly amused and partly intrigued, as she spoke of the park's eerie legends. The firelight danced in her eyes, and for a moment I wondered if there was some truth to the tale she enthusiastically shared. But the cold night air and the comforting glow of the fire kept my fears at bay. Around midnight, a strange stillness settled over the clearing. The usual sounds of the night, crickets, rustling leaves, distant animal calls, seemed to have vanished. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. We were just about to retire for the night when Laura pointed towards the edge of the woods. "Look," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the gentle crackle of the fire. I followed her gaze and saw it, a faint blue light flickering deep within the forest. It wasn't the steady glow of our campfire or the soft luminescence of the moonlight on the snow. This light moved with a purpose, wavering like a beacon calling us into the darkness. "Do you see that?" I asked, feeling a mix of curiosity and unease. Laura nodded, her eyes fixed on the mysterious illumination. "It looks like it's moving. Maybe someone else is out here." Part of me wanted to dismiss it as a trick of the light or perhaps the reflection from some distant source. But something about the way the light danced and moved made me hesitant to ignore it. The stories Laura had shared resurfaced in my mind, of spectral figures and ghostly apparitions that roamed the park's secluded areas. "Should we check it out?" Laura asked, her tone suggesting a mix of excitement and apprehension. I hesitated, glancing at our campfire. The warmth and safety it provided were comforting, but the allure of the unknown tugged at me. "Maybe we should stay here," I suggested. "It's late, and we don't know what's out there." But Laura was already pulling on her jacket, her eyes bright with determination. "Come on, Tom. It could be someone in need, or maybe another camper. We can help." Against my better judgment, I nodded. We grabbed our flashlights and extinguished the fire, the sudden darkness making the woods even more foreboding. As we stepped into the snow-covered forest, the blue light seemed to beckon us deeper into the trees. Each step we took was met with the crunch of snow beneath our boots and the whisper of the wind through the pines. The light led us to a small clearing where a group of people stood in a circle around a fire. They were dressed in flowing white robes that seemed to shimmer in the ethereal glow. The flames of their fire cast long, dancing shadows on their faces, and their eyes held an otherworldly calm. In the center of the circle, the fire burned with a mesmerizing blue hue, casting an unnatural light that illuminated the surrounding snow. "Welcome," one of them said, his voice soft yet resonant. "We've been expecting you." Laura and I exchanged confused glances. "Who are you?" I asked cautiously. "We are the Guardians of the Light," the man replied, his eyes meeting mine with a depth that made me feel like he could see right through me. "We protect the balance between the seen and the unseen, the living and the departed." I felt a chill run down my spine. The air seemed to thicken, and the forest around us grew unnaturally silent, the usual sounds of nocturnal life nowhere to be heard. The Guardians remained motionless, their presence both calming and unsettling. "We mean you no harm," the man continued. "But the balance has been disturbed. The light you see is a sign that the veil between worlds is weakening. We need your help to restore it." Before I could respond, Laura stepped forward, her curiosity overcoming her fear. "How can we help?" The Guardians exchanged glances, and the leader gestured towards the center of the circle. "Follow us. There's much to be done." Without another word, we moved deeper into the clearing, the blue light guiding our path. As we approached the fire, the flames seemed to swirl and dance, creating patterns that felt almost hypnotic. The air was filled with a sense of urgency and purpose, yet also a profound peace. Suddenly, the scene before us shifted. The snow-covered clearing transformed into a bustling campsite from years past, with people setting up tents, preparing meals, and engaging in lively conversations. It was as if we had stepped back in time, witnessing a moment frozen in history. "The disturbance has caused the past to bleed into the present," the leader explained. "We must re-establish the boundaries to prevent chaos from consuming both worlds." I looked around, trying to make sense of what was happening. The Guardians moved gracefully, their actions precise and deliberate as they worked to weave the fabric of reality back together. Laura watched them intently, her expression serious. "What exactly is happening?" I asked, feeling a growing sense of unease. "The veil is thinning," the man replied. Entities from the other side are crossing over, some unintentionally, causing confusion and fear among the living. We need to seal the breach before it grows larger. A sense of responsibility settled over me. If the Guardians were right, and the balance was indeed at risk, then our involvement might be crucial. What do you need us to do? The leader handed me a small, intricately carved amulet. This will help you see what cannot be seen. Use it wisely and trust in the Guardian's guidance. I took the amulet, feeling a surge of energy course through me. Suddenly, the world around me seemed sharper, more vivid. I could see spirits flickering at the edges of my vision, and the air hummed with a palpable tension. We must move quickly, the man urged. The breach is expanding. We need to perform the ritual of sealing to close the gap between our worlds. The Guardians led us to a designated spot within the clearing, where the blue flames burned brighter. They instructed us to arrange ourselves in a specific formation, each person holding an amulet like mine. As we did so, the energy in the air intensified, the temperature dropping sharply despite the winter chill. Laura and I stood side by side, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. The ritual of sealing required concentration and unity, a harmonious blend of our collective intentions to restore the balance. The leader began to chant in a language that felt both foreign and deeply familiar, his voice resonating through the clearing. The Guardians joined in, their voices intertwining with his in a haunting melody that seemed to vibrate with ancient power. As the ritual progressed, the blue flames swirled around us, creating intricate patterns that mirrored the stars above. The spirits we had glimpsed earlier began to gather, their presence both ethereal and poignant. They moved gracefully, acknowledging our efforts with silent gratitude. I felt the amulet in my hand pulsate with energy, syncing with the rhythm of the chant. Laura placed her amulet beside mine, and together, we focused our thoughts on restoring the balance. The air crackled with electricity, and the boundary between the living and the departed seemed to blur. Suddenly, a surge of energy erupted from the fire, and a powerful wave of light enveloped us all. The spirits raised their hands, their faces serene as the veil began to close. The ritual reached its climax, and a brilliant flash of light signaled the sealing of the breach. For a moment, everything was bathed in pure white light, blinding in its intensity. Then, as the light faded, the clearing returned to its peaceful winter state. The blue flames dimmed, and the Guardians stood before us, their mission complete. "You have done well," the leader said, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. "The balance has been restored, thanks to your courage and willingness to help." Laura and I exchanged relieved glances, the tension of the night finally beginning to ease. "What happens now?" I asked. The Guardians began to fade, their forms becoming translucent as they merged with the surrounding forest. "We continue our watch," the leader replied. "But now, with your help, the future remains secure. Remember the amulets as a token of our gratitude and a reminder of the balance you helped restore." As the last of the Guardians disappeared, the blue light that had guided us vanished, leaving behind only the soft glow of the campfire. Laura and I stood in the clearing, the weight of the experience settling over us. We had witnessed something extraordinary, something beyond our understanding, and yet, it had left us with a profound sense of connection to the world around us. The next morning, the snow glistened in the early sunlight, and the forest was alive with the sounds of winter. We packed up our campsite, the amulets safely tucked away as mementos of our encounter. As we made our way back to civilization, the memories of that night lingered, a testament to the unseen forces that shape our world. Days turned into weeks, and life returned to its usual rhythm. But the experience in Yosemite stayed with us, a story we shared with others who were willing to listen. The amulets became symbols of our bond with the park and its hidden guardians, reminding us of the delicate balance between the seen and the unseen. Occasionally, I would catch a glimpse of a blue shimmer in the corner of my eye, a fleeting reminder of the night we stood on the brink between two worlds. It was a subtle, comforting presence, a silent guardian watching over us from the shadows of the forest. One winter evening, years later, Laura and I returned to Yosemite, drawn back to the very spot where our lives had changed. The clearing was just as serene, the snow untouched and the air crisp with the scent of pine. We set up our tent once more, reminiscing about the night that had bonded us in ways we could never have imagined. As dusk settled, we sat by the campfire, the flames flickering and casting long shadows on the snow. The memories of that first encounter felt both distant and vivid, a story etched into the fabric of our lives. We shared our thoughts, grateful for the experience and the peace it had brought to both the living and the departed. As the night grew deep, a faint blue light began to shimmer at the edge of the clearing. We exchanged knowing glances, our hearts filled with a mix of nostalgia and reverence. The guardians of the light had not forgotten us, and we, in turn, had not forgotten them. "Looks like we're not the only ones who remember," Laura whispered, her voice soft and filled with understanding. I nodded, feeling a sense of closure and continuity. It's good to know the balance remains intact, and that there are still those who watch over us. The blue light faded into the night, leaving behind only the warmth of our campfire and the enduring bond between us and the mystical guardians of Yosemite. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty and mystery of the park, I understood that some connections transcend time and space, binding us to the unseen forces that shape our world. Story number 5. The Bride of Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan, Michigan. Winter in Michigan is unforgiving. The cold bites through layers of clothing, and the nights stretch long and silent under a blanket of snow. I've always loved the solitude that comes with driving along the shores of Lake Michigan during these months. There's something both peaceful and haunting about the vast expanse of frozen water, the snow-covered pines, and the distant lights of small towns reflecting off the ice. It was on one particularly frigid night that my life took a turn I couldn't have imagined. I was driving home after a long day at work, the highway eerily quiet except for the rhythmic crunch of snow under my tires. The moon was full, casting a silvery glow over the landscape, making everything appear almost otherworldly. As I rounded a bend along the lakeshore, my headlights caught something unusual, a figure standing on the side of the road. At first, I thought it might be a deer or some other animal, but as I drew closer, the shape became more distinct. It was a woman, dressed in a flowing white gown that seemed out of place against the stark winter backdrop. Her hair was long and dark, cascading down her back, and she stood perfectly still, gazing into the distance as if waiting for something. My heart raced. A woman in a white dress on this desolate stretch of road was highly unusual. I slowed down, my mind racing with questions. Was she lost? Did she need help? Should I call the authorities? The rational part of me hesitated, but compassion got the better of caution. I pulled over to the side of the road, the engine ticking softly as I turned it off. I rolled down my window, the cold air rushing in, mingling with the faint scent of pine and snow. "Are you okay?" I called out, my voice steady despite the nervous flutter in my chest. She turned her head slowly, her eyes meeting mine. They were a deep, haunting blue, filled with sorrow and something else I couldn't quite place, perhaps fear or desperation. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, she extended a hand toward me, her fingers trembling slightly. "Please," I whispered, stepping out of the car. The cold bit at my skin, making me shiver, but I couldn't leave her out here alone. I approached her cautiously, the snow crunching under my boots. As I got closer, I noticed the intricate details of her gown, the delicate lace and beadwork that sparkled faintly in the moonlight. Her presence was ethereal, almost ghostly, yet she seemed so real, so tangible. "Can I help you?" I asked gently, reaching out to offer my assistance. For a moment, she remained silent, her gaze fixed on something beyond my sight. Then, slowly, she nodded, as if understanding my intentions. She began to walk along the roadside, her steps graceful and measured, leading me toward the edge of the lake. I followed, my mind struggling to make sense of the situation. As we reached the water's edge, the temperature seemed to drop even further, the air growing thick with an inexplicable tension. The lake was vast, its surface frozen solid, reflecting the moonlight in shimmering patterns. She stopped and turned to face me again, her expression one of profound sadness. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the whispering wind. "I've been waiting for someone to help me." Before I could respond, a sudden gust of wind swept through the area, blowing her hair across her face and causing her gown to billow dramatically. I reached out to touch her, but my hand passed through her as if she were made of mist. Panic surged through me as I realized she wasn't corporeal, she was a ghost, a specter trapped between worlds. "No!" I exclaimed, stepping back in horror. "What do you want from me?" Her eyes bore into mine, pleading and sorrowful. I'm lost. I can't find my way back. The weight of her sadness pressed down on me, and I felt a deep sense of empathy. Tell me what happened. Maybe I can help. She hesitated, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. Then, she began to speak, her voice now clearer, tinged with anguish. I was to be married here, by the lake, in the snow. It was our first winter together, our first night as husband and wife. But tragedy struck. I listened intently as she recounted her story. It was a tale of love and loss from decades past, a young bride named Eleanor who had vanished on her wedding night in 1955. Her fiancé, Michael, had been searching for her when a sudden blizzard had swept through the area, engulfing them in its icy embrace. Michael never found Eleanor, and rumors swirled about her disappearance, with some claiming to have seen her spirit wandering the shores ever since. As she spoke, the air around us seemed to grow colder, the silence deepening. Her story was heartbreaking, and I felt a profound sadness for the woman who was now trapped in this liminal space between life and death. I can't move on, Eleanor said, her voice filled with despair. I'm stuck here, unable to find peace. I reached out again, this time more determined to help. Maybe there's something I can do. Is there a way to help you move on? She looked down, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. There is a way, but it requires finding what was lost that night. My wedding ring, Michael's watch, it was all taken by the storm. Without them, the bond that tied us is broken. I nodded, understanding the task at hand. I'll help you find them. Where were they last seen? Eleanor pointed toward a specific area along the shoreline, a spot where the ice had cracked under the weight of the storm. That's where the ice gave way. Everything fell into the frozen depths. Determined to assist her, I asked, how can I find them now? She handed me a small, glimmering object, a pendant with intricate engravings. This is my pendant. It will guide you to the place where the storm hit hardest. Trust it, and it will lead you to what you seek. I took the pendant, feeling a strange warmth emanate from it despite the frigid night. I'll do everything I can. Eleanor smiled faintly, her form beginning to fade. Thank you, Tom. Please, find the ring in the watch. Help us find peace. As she vanished completely, the forest around me seemed to come alive with whispers and rustling leaves, as if acknowledging the task I had been given. Clutching the pendant, I knew what I had to do. The next morning, the sun had risen, but the landscape was still covered in snow, the remnants of the storm lingering in the air. I set out early, following the guidance of the pendant, which glowed softly against my chest. The path led me to the spot Eleanor had indicated, where the ice lay fractured and treacherous. With a deep breath, I began to search the area, my eyes scanning the frozen surface for any sign of the lost items. Hours passed, and my efforts seemed futile until I spotted a glint beneath a broken section of ice. Kneeling down, I reached out and felt around the edge, my fingers brushing against something smooth and cold. Carefully, I pulled out Michael's watch, its face frozen in time. Nearby, partially buried in the snow, lay Eleanor's wedding ring, its diamond still sparkling despite the years that had passed. Relief washed over me as I realized I had found what was needed to help her move on. Returning to the lakeshore, I placed the ring and watch near the spot where Eleanor had appeared. As I did, the pendant's glow intensified, and a soft breeze rustled through the trees. I looked up, hoping to see a sign that my efforts were not in vain. There, in the center of the clearing, the ethereal form of Eleanor stood once more, her presence now serene and peaceful. She smiled warmly, her eyes reflecting gratitude and relief. "Thank you, Tom," she whispered, her voice like a gentle breeze. "You've given us the peace we longed for." As she faded away, the atmosphere around me changed. The cold seemed to lift, replaced by a comforting warmth that spread through the forest. The whispers and rustling leaves transformed into a harmonious melody, as if nature itself was celebrating the restoration of balance. Driving home that day, I couldn't shake the feeling of having witnessed something extraordinary. The pendant remained with me, a tangible reminder of the night I helped a lost soul find peace. It became a cherished keepsake, its intricate engravings a testament to the bond between the living and the departed. Months passed, and life returned to its usual rhythm. Yet, The memory of that night lingered, etched into my mind like the frozen patterns on Lake Michigan's icy surface. I often found myself gazing out the window, contemplating the thin veil that separates our world from the mysteries that lie just beyond our sight. One evening, years later, I received a call from an old friend who had also spent time at Lake Michigan. She shared her own encounter, a woman in white, similar to Eleanor, seeking help. Her story mirrored mine, and together, we realized that there were still restless spirits seeking closure on the shores of the Great Lake. Determined to honor their stories, we began documenting our experiences, sharing them with others who had encountered the supernatural in the region. Our accounts resonated with many, offering solace to those who had faced similar tragedies and helping to bring peace to the spirits that still wandered the frozen landscapes. The legend of Eleanor, the young bride who vanished on her wedding night, became a beacon of hope and remembrance. It reminded us all of the enduring power of love and the importance of helping those who are lost find their way home. As winter returns to Lake Michigan each year, the stories continue to grow, woven into the fabric of the park's rich history. And though the nights are long and the cold is harsh, there is a sense of warmth and connection that lingers, a testament to the bonds that transcend time and space. The Bride of Lake Michigan is no longer just a ghost story, it's a symbol of love's enduring presence and the quiet courage of those who reach out to help others find their way. And as long as there are those willing to listen and help, the spirits of the lake will continue to find peace, their stories echoing through the silent winter nights.